The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hi, welcome to the Ring and All Out Sports. My name is Leo Connors, I'm your host, and tonight I got a very special guest, New England Championship Wrestling promoting promoter and owner, Sheldon Goldberg. Sheldon.
Leo, I finally made it.
Yes, thank you so much.
It's good to be here.
We had Sheldon scheduled earlier, then you had some health issues, and now you're here, and we can get going with this.
I'm here. Live and in living color in public, if you will.
Yeah, Dusty.
As Dusty would have said. Yes.
Love Dusty.
Yes.
Guys, we're going to do 60 minutes, and then we're going to take like a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back live again and do 30 more minutes, okay? So we're going to get right into it. Sheldon, I know when you in your younger years you were involved with doing plays. Could you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, I'll try to do it as quickly as I can because I know you got a lot of territory to go. You got writer's cramp from writing all these questions.
I do.
But yeah, before I got involved in wrestling, I had a whole different career. Actually, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I wanted to be in broadcasting.
Right.
And it worked out to some extent. I did get some jobs and some experience, and then it kind of didn't work out because I was in a very big market. And typically in broadcasting, the way you make it is you start in a small market and you work your way up.
Right.
But because I lived in Boston, and Boston was a big market, I was in a big market. And at the time, my parents were not in very good shape health-wise. So I really wasn't able to leave the area.
Right.
And I had to come up with creative ways to keep busy. And I ran into a friend of mine who was an actor locally. And he said, well, why don't you do publicity? Because, you know all the media people in town. You might as well put that skill to use and do something with it. And I said, maybe you got something there. So it clicked. And before I knew it, I was working on, pre-Broadway tryouts of Broadway shows, and then, shows on tour when they came through town. And eventually, I actually started producing plays, wrote and produced stuff. I did the first show I wrote and produced was a musical review called Dancing in the Street, which was a huge hit in Boston, ran for almost 2 years, and was in fact the creation of what they call on Broadway today the jukebox musical. That was actually, believe it or not, my invention.
Wow.
So it was a great time and a great career, and helped me in terms of promoting wrestling years later. My theater experience and my wrestling experience intersected in two places.
Okay.
There was a guy that used to promote wrestling in Boston. He was the Worldwide Wrestling Federation promoter, and his name was Abe Ford.
Right. And
Abe had his office in the theater district. And I used to see him all the time, and he was buying lunch or whatever. I'd say, hey, Abe, if I have any shows I'm doing, get any extra tickets, give me your number. I'll call you up, and I'll invite you. And I would do that. And so I got to know him. He almost never talked wrestling with me. Wow. It was almost a sore subject with him because he was out as the WWF promoter as of the early 70s. Okay. 75, 76, I believe. There was a lawsuit between him and Vince McMahon Sr. And Abe won the suit, so Sr. had to buy him out.
Wow.
Another point of history for another show, which we could do 10 shows on this.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so I knew Abe and knew a little bit something about what was going on. And then later, when I started producing, I ran into a guy in the advertising business by the name of Joe Perkins. Joe Perkins was a car dealer's advertising guy for car dealerships, but he also did the television syndication for the Worldwide Wrestling Federation and then the World Wrestling Federation, and was a key player in the national expansion of the WWF. It was through him that I met Vince McMahon for the first time when he came to see my show. And so I knew Joe pretty well. He actually invested in another play that I produced. And so, but I never thought about getting into the business.
Really?
No, that happened much later.
Wow.
Much later. So
that's very interesting.
Yeah,
like
I worked with a lot of big Broadway stars and so forth. It was, once you could do that stuff, then you can work with just about anybody. So
I knew I had to ask her that because George was telling me, George Carroll was like, Leo, you really need to know. You know, the
Yeah,
stuff
well,
he did early.
another thing, we could do another show on that, but I
and
know you want to get to
definitely-
other stuff.
I definitely would love to do more. So,
yeah.
So we're going to get right into the little interview. Like I always start off, guys, with just a little get to know you interview right up the bat. Sheldon, where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Boston. Grew up in Mattapan, actually.
Okay.
And I live in Roslindale, so I didn't stray too far.
Yeah. Right. When did you first see pro wrestling? How old were you?
My vaguest early memories of pro wrestling were like the early 60s. You know, seeing it on the old black and white TV.
Right.
My grandmother, my mother's mother, was the only wrestling fan in the family.
At least you had
And
one.
she died when I was very, very young. So,
Yeah.
But her thing was the lady wrestlers and the midgets.
Okay.
She loved that the most.
Right.
So that's kind of where I got that. If I had the wrestling gene, that was where it came from.
Right. Now, did you, do you remember who you first saw? Do you remember? Or was it, or you just too
I
little?
remember seeing Buddy Rogers.
Buddy Rogers, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So does Vince McMahon Jr., is his strut really like Buddy's? Or,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pretty
really?
much. Exaggerated, but yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I just had to ask that because I
Right.
don't know anyone that could give me that answer. Were your friends into wrestling growing
Not
up?
really. A couple were, but
Right.
you know, we didn't like go to matches together or anything
Right.
like that. I used to drag my dad, kicking and screaming most of the time. He didn't want to go.
Right. But he
But,
went
but
anyways?
he went, and of course, when Jay Strongbow came on, he was the loudest guy in the building.
Right.
So,
That's the first guy I saw,
Yeah.
was Chief Jay Strong.
right.
When did you know you wanted to be a part of pro wrestling? Obviously, like you just said, it was later in life, right?
Yeah, much later in life. I had no designs on being involved in pro wrestling.
Wow.
Just when my theater business as a producer started to go downhill because of economic changes
Right.
in the business, I got to do something. So I started doing a newsletter for collectors of wrestling memorabilia called Matt Marketplace. And it was just a hobby.
Right.
I had no designs on it being anything special or something that it was just a hobby, something I enjoyed doing. I wanted to write more. I wanted to start like producing things graphic wise and
Right.
so forth. And so I did that, and it clicked and it took off, and you know, had a good little run with that, and it put me in touch with a lot of people in wrestling, some of whom I knew vaguely,
Right.
some of whom I knew, you know, fairly well. Had met I'd met Walter Kowalski a number of times over the years, and I've said Abe Ford, I'd said that, but you know, it was just I didn't even have any designs on it being a foot in the door, but it became one.
Right.
You know, it just sort of took on a life of its own.
Right. Well, the next question leads right into that. How did you get involved?
Well, I was asked one time, invited to one of Walter's shows, and it was really one of the first times that I had really seen independent wrestling, or what was independent wrestling at the time. And after a while, I got asked if I wanted to sell merch at the shows, because I had it. I was selling it mail order, and I started to do that, and that lasted for a little while. And then I met Tony Rumble.
Right.
And I met Tony, it was 1989 or 90. John Arezzi had a convention in New York, the first one that he did, the Weekend of Champions. That was the one that had Buddy Rogers, Bruno, Lou Thez, just an amazing, Ric Flair,
Yeah.
an amazing lineup of people.
And this was in Boston or
This
New
was
York?
in New York,
Or New York,
at
okay.
the LaGuardia Airport.
Yep.
And Rumble comes up to the table. I'd never met him before until that moment. We grew up less than a mile away from each other.
Wow.
In the same town, in Roslindale.
Right.
And we'd never met until that moment, and we became fast friends. So then he started having me come to shows and sell merch, and I said to him, well, what can I do to help you? He never charged me for a table, never asked me for anything. So, well, what can I do to help you? So I started doing things like the posters and the flyers and the tickets, and I did the website. I did the NWA New England, or CWA NWA New England website.
Right.
So I was doing that, and until he passed away, we worked on a lot of different things together. Wow. He was like the brother I never had.
Right.
Never really got over his death, to be perfectly honest.
Right. I know a lot of people were very close to Tony. It was
Yeah.
very sad. I remember, like when he had passed that week, I went to a show, Lobster Man, Jeff Costa's show, and everybody was talking about it, and I was like blown away. In the late 90s, no, I'm sorry, was it the late 90s you were instrumental in bringing Michinoku Pro to the
Yes.
United States? How
Yes.
did that all come about?
Total accident.
Really?
Yep. What happened was I was doing the newsletter, Matt Marketplace, and people would write to me and say, well, how can I get stuff from this place or that place? And Michinoku had kind of a cult following in Japan and somewhat of a following in the U.S. because of it. And someone asked me about Michinoku merchandise. So I wrote to them blind letter to them, and a guy answered me who worked in the office there. And he says, well, I'm going to be coming to Boston soon, and maybe we can meet. Maybe we can get together and, we'll meet and we'll talk, and maybe we can work something out or whatever. So he comes to Boston, and the weekend that he came to Boston, ECW was at Wonderland.
Right.
I said, well, let me take you to ECW. Paul, Richard, and I were good friends.
Yeah.
I bring him to ECW. This is the night of the mass transit incident.
Oh, wow.
Of all things.
Wow.
All right. So I've got this kid from Michinoku there, and Paul and I sat down with him. Paul Heyman and I made this introduction, and Paul says, we're getting ready to do our first pay-per-view. I'd like to invite Michinoku to send a match. Oh, thank you. I'll go back. I tell Great Sasuke. Oh, we have. Wow. So he goes back to Japan. 3 days later, I get a phone call. Oh, Sheldon-san, it's Koji from Michinoku. Oh, Great Sasuke, accept Paul Heyman's offer. You do all business for us. So this puts me right in the middle between Paul and Michinoku.
Yeah.
So they sent over in February of '96. They sent over a whole group of guys, and they did a couple of ECW shows. They did a show for us, for Century Wrestling Alliance, in Chelsea, Mass, at the old Chelsea Armory, which is now no longer there. And they performed the whole weekend for all of us. And oddly enough, WWF was in town at Lowell. Everybody was in town that night.
Right.
When we had the show in Chelsea, Kevin Sullivan was on the show.
Wow.
So they just met all the power brokers pretty much, except the WWF guys, which they didn't meet. That's a story for another time. But they got a chance to be seen by all these people, and this was the height of the Monday Night Wars. So there was a big competition for talent, and so that's how they got hooked up with ECW. That was, and it was an accident.
Right. And that match, I remember that match on the paper.
Right.
Incredible. Incredible.
Yep.
I want to backtrack now because I really wanted to know that story. But I want to talk a little bit more about your relationship with Tony Rumble. Now, how many years did you get to work with him before he passed?
About 7 years.
About 7 years, yeah. And any great Tony Rumble stories?
There's tons of great Tony Rumble stories. We could do 10 shows on Tony Rumble stories.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of his guys are watching, so I would find a couple.
He was a great person. He was street smart.
Right.
He could talk to anybody. He had a knack of just being able to connect with people.
Right.
He was very smart in terms of wrestling smart. I learned a whole lot from him.
Right.
Being close to him was a real privilege. He was a super guy. He helped a lot of people. During that period, Jim Cornette was living up here. He was living in Connecticut.
Right.
He would be used on the shows a lot. They would be pulling guys out of Tony stuff to be. Steve Bradley got signed because of Tony.
Wow.
Yeah, he got signed. They pulled him right off of one of Tony's shows and said, "Yeah, let's sign this kid up." Because of his relationship with Kevin Sullivan, he got a lot of guys into WCW. Rick Fuller owes his WCW career to Tony.
Yep.
So he did a lot of things for a lot of people. He was also a forward thinker.
Right.
He was a guy who had a very definite vision of what he wanted to do in terms of wrestling. He made me believe in the idea of local wrestling. Right. Yeah, I'm sorry he's not here. Like I said, I never really got over his passing.
I believe that. That's it. A lot of other people haven't either, for sure. All right, so that same question. Did you work any more with Paul Heyman? I should say, after that.
No, not really.
Okay,
not really. I like Paul. I'm very fond of Paul.
Right.
I think Paul is a genius in a lot of ways.
Right.
A better businessman than most people give him credit for. But Paul had his quirks too.
Yep.
Paul's one of those people that everything was like a shell game. And the reason that ECW failed, in my opinion, was the shell game got too big, and he just couldn't. The more shells are on the table,
right,
the less you can control where the ball is.
Right.
So, but I have a lot of fond fond feelings for Paul Heyman.
Great. Now we're going to move on to how did NECW, New England Championship Wrestling, form in 2000?
Well, Tony had passed away in November of 1999. Very big blow to me. And, of course, there was a lot of talk what was going to happen after he was gone. What was going to happen to the company? Was it going to continue? Was it not going to continue? Right. The two people that really worked closest with Tony were Pat Doyle, who did the TV and was brilliant at it, and myself.
Right.
And it was expected by a lot of people that we would be the ones to kind of pick up the ball and run with it. After Tony passed away, Pat really didn't want to do that. He said, Tony's gone, it's over. That was how he felt in his mind.
Right.
Tony's widow decided that Jeff Katz and Knuckles Nelson should take over the company. And you know, that was her decision to make.
Right.
And she was entitled to make that decision. But I started to help them, and I just saw it going the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I said, guys, I'm out of here.
Yep.
Can't do it. And I really didn't have a plan B. I didn't think about what to do, and then I was having a conversation with Scott Dickinson. He says, you know, you really ought to start something. And I thought about it, and I said to myself, you know, if I don't do it, I'll kick myself for never having tried to do it.
Right.
So I thought it out, and I said, yeah, let's go. Let's try this. And here we are 18 years later, still doing it.
Now, like with that, when you knew you were going to start up, you grabbed a few guys to help you, or?
Scott Dickinson really was the guy that helped me do it. Without him, I couldn't have done it. So Scott Dickinson was the original booker, helped me put stuff together. And,
right.
you know, there were guys that I tried to make it different from what Tony was doing.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't follow it. Tony,
Right.
CWA and NWA New England was really Tony's personality.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't try to imitate it, and you couldn't try to, you know, copy it, because you really couldn't copy it. It was so much of him.
Yeah.
And I had a little bit of a different idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a promotion that was a little more serious, that was a little more about, you know, trying to give some, you know, aura of credibility.
Right.
I really believed in the idea of local wrestling, as Tony did. Believed in the idea of, you know, incredible titles and guys moving up and down the card. Because what I thought that the area was missing at the time was an actual promotion in the true sense of the word.
Right.
Because what independent wrestling was, up until that point in this area, was basically a formula. You get one or two name guys to be on top, and then the rest of the show is students.
Right.
Or, you know, in the case of what Kowalski was doing, and not that it was bad or anything like that, it wasn't.
Right.
But he wasn't actually promoting shows. All of his shows were sold shows.
Right.
So he might have 20 or 30 shows in a year, but they were in 20 or 30 different towns, and only went to each town once a year.
Right.
That's not really building a fan base or promoting anything. So I wanted to actually build a fan base. Tony was unique in what he was doing, in that not only did he do sold shows, but he also promoted shows off of that.
Right.
So if he had a big sold show on a Saturday night, he might book the night before and run his own deal off of that, or vice versa.
Right.
So he was very smart that way, and tried to build a fan base and tried to use the names to help build what he was doing. But Tony was also about TV.
Right.
And he lived and died for that TV. So I thought that you know, that type of real promotion, where, you know, stuff you can follow,
Right.
was what was missing in the area, and that's what I wanted to bring. And that's
With
what NECW was
storylines
about.
and stuff.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Great. And also now it leads to this great, that led right into this. This is beautiful. One of the things I love about NECW is that you're family friendly. Was that also something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, it's also good business.
Right.
You know, a lot of the, you know, during the ECW hardcore wrestling boom, where there's a lot of violent stuff, a lot of that stuff just wasn't going to fly. People wouldn't rent you their buildings.
Right.
A lot of buildings got ruined for wrestling because of, you know, people being crazy and stupid and opening each other up and so forth. So.
Right. That's awesome. And I've never asked anyone this question. I talked to you a little bit about this off the air, but did the emergence of Ring of Honor in 2002, doing shows in the area, hurt New England promotions?
I think it did, and I'll explain why. When Ring of Honor first came around, I was trying to help them up here. We actually had some Ring of Honor matches on some of our early shows. The first time the Briscoe brothers faced each other was in NECW. But you know, when we would send a match over there, they would do something subtle to kind of bury it. You know, and I didn't think that was too cool. They were just trying to take, rather than be friends with us, and we were trying to be friends with them. And you know, I did a lot of things for Ring of Honor. I got them Doug Williams. Yep. They wanted to book Doug Williams. I was the one that, Doug Williams had his first match in America for NECW. Sumi Sakai was somebody that I brought them. Also a bunch of British wrestlers like Johnny Storm, Jody Fleisch. Brought all those guys in. For Ring of Honor dates and so forth. So, but you know, they're tried to be this super indie, but you know, many times what they would do is come to Boston and they say, oh, come on guys, you know, if you come to our show and sell tickets, we'll give you a match and whatever. And all they're doing is just jobbing those guys out and using them to sell tickets. And when they're running against the local companies, they're not doing local wrestling any favors. You know, because they're really, at that time anyway, they were promoting buildings on the same level that we were. I remember one time we were running the Armory in Brockton, and they were running the Armory in Braintree. And they had trashed the building. And the guy who was in charge of the Brockton Armory said, you know, hey, I don't think we can do business with you guys anymore. You know, you destroyed the building in Braintree. I said, what are you talking about? We never ran in Braintree. It was Ring of Honor. So they tried to pin all, you know, they think wrestling is wrestling. So they tried to pin that on us. So Ring of Honor also went through a lot of buildings here too.
Yes, they did.
They took a lot of buildings off of the market.
Yeah, almost every time they came. The first couple of years they were in a different building. I remember that. And you brought up Sumi Sakai 16 years later. Now, she came around in 2002 for you, or was that
That's right, 2001 or 2002.
Now she's the Ring of Honor Women's Champion.
An amazing story. Here's a girl who was a star in Japan.
Gave
it all up to come to America.
Take a chance.
Take a chance, to start a new life. She wanted to live in America. She wanted to work in America, wrestle in America. And it took her all that time, but she did MMA for a while. I mean, she was an Olympic level judoka before getting into wrestling. I'll tell you a quick story about her. I didn't realize how tough she was. She was just this cute little girl when but you know, we were having coffee one time, and she brushed her hair back. She had cauliflower ears. And I said, oh my God, this girl's the real deal. I better not piss her off or anything, you know? So, but she's a great girl. And very, very happy that she made a great life for herself here in America.
Now, how about your very first show that you promoted? Do you remember what the main event was?
Yeah, we were doing a tournament for the NECW heavyweight title. And eventually Mike Hollow won the title, but that wasn't that night. It was the second time we went back. It was in Wethersfield, Connecticut.
Oh, wow.
At a little indoor arcade called the Fun Zone.
Nice. You were the first to produce a weekly television wrestling program for the internet. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you went to, was it NECW TV? What was it, .TV? Something like that?
Well, we called it NECW TV. Later, we started a different website called NECW.TV. And then we just dropped the NECWWrestling.com. It's just NECW.TV. And that's how it remains. Although we still own that domain name, we just don't use it.
And at one time, you were getting 20,000 views a week.
Sometimes more.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I can't get 100 people to watch my show a week. Maybe it'll change with the other.
You never know.
Yeah, it's true.
You never know.
Well, my buddy told me the other day, we're at the Joe Bruins great event, which was phenomenal, Joe. Awesome, first class. But
Joe,
yes.
We bow.
And you know, my buddy told me there's a target audience for everything. So just got to find that target. But all right. So and it also helped with the DVD releases, correct?
Although DVD releases, only the women's stuff really sold well.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get into that promotion after.
Yep.
Well, the Iron 8, was that your idea alone?
Yes. Well, actually, it evolved from something else. On, I believe it was our 3rd anniversary, Kevin Kelly, the Ring of Honor, former WWE announcer, was the matchmaker for us at the time.
Right.
And he had the idea to do a 4-way 45-minute Ironman match for the NECW title as the main event on our 3rd anniversary. And the match went over so well, I wanted to come up with some kind of a signature event for us, like a Royal Rumble or a, you know, whatever. And so I said, yeah, maybe this leading into some kind of a tournament would be a cool thing to do. So that's how the Iron 8 evolved. It was just me doing a twist on the traditional 8-man tournament. The Super 8 was became a big thing for ECWA and still is a big thing.
Yes.
So I wanted to do our own thing that would be kind of a landmark thing, and came up with the Iron 8.
Nice. You brought up the Super 8. A couple of guys wrestled in it from around here this year. Well,
Right.
I know
Actually, Richard Holiday won.
won it, yes.
Yeah.
And Anthony Green was also in it.
Right.
Now, out of all the Iron 8 tournaments, which one are you most proud of?
Oh, gosh. I'll tell you which one. There are two.
Okay.
The one in Quincy that Harley Race was the guest at, and the one in, was it 2012? Where Brad Hollister
I was going to say
won the title.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are people who still say that was the best night of wrestling they've ever seen in their lives.
Quite a talented guy, Brad Hollister.
Yes, very much so.
Definitely. And it was an incredibly talented list of wrestlers who have won the Iron 8. I mean, Chris Venom, Paul Labate, diehard Eddie Edwards twice.
Right.
Alex Arion, Antonio Thomas, Warbeard Hanson, known as Handsome Johnny Hayes at the time. Brad Hollister and Toto Loco are the winners so
And
far.
Mike McCarthy.
Oh, that's right. This year was Mike McCarthy.
Right.
Is there one of the tournaments that you look back on and think, wow, I can't believe I was able to book this group of wrestlers? Or is it all of them?
All of them.
Yeah.
All of them. Yeah.
You've always had talented guys in there, that's for sure.
Yeah, we were very, very fortunate.
One more question about the Iron 8. Well, actually, you already answered. I'm sorry, because I was going to say what made you think of the setup, but it was the 4-way match that you had. In 2006, NECW merged with PWF Mayhem, with you both operating under the NECW brand. How did that all come about?
Had an ugly split with Bob Evans.
Yeah.
And was actually George Carroll that called me and started the conversation. And then, you know, Matt and Kyle got in touch with me. We all got together, and, you know, it just made sense.
Right.
You know, I had another direction I could have gone in, but I wanted to do that one because, you know, they were local guys. They were invested in the area. And from the conversations that we were having, everybody had the same goals going in. Everybody wanted to accomplish something bigger than what we could do separately. And, you know, initially it was a very good marriage.
Right. The talent that was on that roster then was quite possibly the most talented roster of any promotion in New England wrestling, New England independent wrestling history of all time. Was it hard to keep everybody happy, as you could really only push a few guys at a time?
You know what? I wasn't really so much involved with the booking. Not until the last several years did I really get involved deeply into the booking. Yeah, I would, you know, sort of give my opinions and try to push things in one direction or another and try to steer things in a way that I wanted them and try to influence them. But I didn't really get into the nuts and bolts booking until later. But I thought, you know, I think a lot of the things that propelled it forward were just the idea. Here were two companies that were doing stuff in the area. And now those two companies are going to come together.
Right.
How are the titles going to go? The drama of how that's going to all blend together was what was propelling business forward. So it was an interesting time and a good one.
And you had put the champions of both promotions against each other to find out who was going to be carrying the titles.
Right. Really, the truth is that in that merger, there were very few NECW guys. That the only ones really were Sabotage and Arion. Those were the only guys that I really cared about bringing over. Anybody else didn't make a difference.
Right. Now, I know two guys that are booked for you, and that's about it. You know, why don't you tell us about your bookers? I know George was a booker for you.
Right.
And Sonny Goodspeed also?
Sonny Goodspeed. Scott Dickinson was the first.
Yep.
Then Sonny Goodspeed. Then Kevin Kelly for a while. And then was Bob Evans.
Yeah.
And then came the merger with Matt, with George assisting him.
Right.
And then when we split at the end of 2010, it was George for a while, and then I took it over with Kevin Castro assisting me.
Okay.
So that's the history of NECW booking right there.
What was the demise of it all back then?
I'm going to say this as kindly as I can say it, okay?
Exactly. I don't
wanna,
need you to bury anybody.
I'm not trying to bury anyone,
Right.
but the truth is, it came down to people having different goals and different visions.
Right.
Right. I wanted to run a full-time wrestling business and grow the company as big as possible. My partners did not. They did not want to give up their day jobs. They did not want to take the leap and really, push forward. And I did. And that's where it sort of fell apart.
Right.
But, if you really want to do something, you really have to do it all the way. You can't do it halfway.
Right.
And
My dad taught me that when I was little.
Right.
Just cleaning your room.
yeah.
Now, back in what was the year that you had the cage match between Brian Fury and DC Dillinger?
That was 2007.
2007.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, for a long time, everybody thought that was, I know that those two guys definitely thought it was the greatest match of their career. What was your favorite match, and why would you rank it as the greatest?
I'll tell you what I believe the greatest match in NECW history
Yes.
was. There's a long list of ones that are great,
Right.
and we could talk about that for the rest of the show. But the one that stands out in my mind was at the 2008 Iron 8, 2008 or 2009. Harley Race was there to present the trophy. Antonio Thomas won the Iron 8 that year, but the greatest match was earlier in the night. It was a mixed tag.
Yeah.
With Alex Arion and Mr. Spellmont on one side versus Max Bauer and I believe Alexis Nevaeh on the other side.
Wow.
Now, Alex Arion to me is the most talented guy never to be signed to a major contract that ever worked in New England. So they're having this match, and Alex is getting heat on Max Bauer, who is twice his size.
Yes.
Harley Race is sitting with Joe Matarazzo and I doing commentary. Harley got so into the match that Harley Race, who was walking with a walker by this time, creaky Harley Race gets out of his chair, folds it up, and starts going after Arion and backs him up. There's this little, byplay between them. They didn't say a word, totally unplanned. And it was the greatest compliment that I think Alex Arion ever got. And to me, that was just a phenomenal, phenomenal match. I sat there like with my jaw hanging out.
Right.
I just couldn't believe that these guys were. And I told Alex Arion, that was the greatest match ever.
Right. Nice.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about a guy that worked for you for a long time that passed away like a year ago or so, DC Dillinger.
Oh, my.
He worked for you for a long time. Do you think that he was the greatest heel to come out of NECW? Because I've seen him at plenty of shows, your shows, where he would come out and, without saying a word, I thought people would want to throw things at him. I mean, he was pretty hated.
Oh, absolutely. True difference maker.
Right.
True difference maker. Greatest ever. And, it wasn't that he was so physically gifted in terms of wrestling.
Right.
Although he was gifted. He was a talented kid. But just that whole aura that he gave off.
Presence.
People just hated him.
Yeah.
Hated him. And the marriage of him, Eddie Edwards, and Sean Gorman really propelled the company. And George.
Yes.
You got to throw George
Yep.
in there.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, I just put out a series of videos not too long ago, several months back, called NECW Legendary. It's a series of about 13 videos that are available on YouTube. We'll get you a link somehow, somewhere. And it kind of goes through that period for the most part, and the matches and the things that happened and the people that worked here and the things. And it's just so clear how those guys had really kind of gelled and propelled the whole business forward.
Right.
And the thing about DC is that he really wanted to be great. Right. And we were the guys that gave him the opportunity to lead the charge, and when nobody else would.
Right.
You know, he did a promo one time about being blackballed in New England. That's true. A lot of people did not like that kid.
Right.
I loved him to death. I thought he was great. I thought he had He was the closest thing to Tony Rumble to me in terms of just his not just his personality, but his love of wrestling.
Right.
And his desire to be great and make a mark in it. And I was so glad that in my lifetime I was able to give an opportunity to someone like that.
Right. He touched a lot of people's lives too.
He sure did.
He helped a lot of people out too. He definitely did.
Yep.
Now, I want to talk a little about the hot dog safari that you guys were affiliated with. Now, you were affiliated with them right from the start, correct?
No, Tony Rumble got the hot dog safari before I even got involved in it.
Yeah.
But Eddie Andelman and I are actually distant relatives.
Oh, wow.
Believe it or not.
I used to listen to Eddie going to bed on Sunday
Right,
night.
sure.
Every
absolutely.
Sunday night when I was younger.
I mean, we weren't close or anything
Right.
like that. We didn't go to family events together or anything
but
like that.
that's still cool.
But it wasn't until much later when they wanted to do wrestling again. It's kind of an interesting story. Is I did a radio show on what used to be 1510 The Zone.
Yep.
And we during Hurricane Katrina, we wanted to do a promotion with the radio station. They were talking to me about doing a radio show. And we did a benefit show for the victims of Hurricane Katrina that was broadcast live on radio.
Wow.
Which was something that hadn't been done in like 30 years.
Right.
From Good Times. This was in the Bob Evans era. It was on a Thursday night. And we were like maybe a week or so away from doing it. And the guy that we had made the deal with left the station. And the new guy claimed to have no idea of the deal.
Right.
And I kept calling and calling. You know, we had already promoted it and done press releases and were advertising it and so forth. Booked the building, booked the guys, all this. And the guy said, well, we're not doing it. I said, oh, yes, you are.
Right.
And the guy said, well, no, we're not doing it. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, you are doing it. And I'm coming to your office. I'm going to be sitting there waiting for you until you sit and talk to me face to face. So when I show up, the guys, they're shaking like a leaf.
Right.
So, all right, well, we'll do it. We'll do it. So we did it. And then some months later, he calls me back and he says, hey, you know, I'm doing the hot dog safari for Eddie Andelman this year, and why don't you guys bring wrestling? Eddie loves wrestling. We'd love to have wrestling back.
Right.
So that's how we got to do it. And we did it for several years.
Right.
And it was a lot of fun to do, and it got some pretty good exposure. There was one year that they actually broadcast part of it on TV.
Oh, wow.
On whatever the Comcast channel was. Right. Or
That's amazing.
Right. So we did a live spot with the DC and Fury.
Nice.
We did a live angle.
Yeah.
And so it was fun times. It was good. It was all for charity, which was important.
Now, I think one year that you guys were there, they raised over $1 million.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Because I do remember that. I was there, and I remember Kofi was in the ring that year. Mm-hmm. Kofi. Now, that's another thing I'd like to touch before we get into fan question, things like that. A lot of guys have wrestled for you that have gone on to huge things. I mean, like you said earlier, you were the first one to bring Doug Williams over. Sumi Sakai, helping getting the Michinoku Pro guys over here. Finn Balor.
Right.
But just a lot of guys. I mean, Nikki Rocks. They've all wrestled for you and have gone on to bigger and better things.
Right.
Who are you most proud of? Is there one to say?
All of them.
All of them.
All of them. If they made it, if they did anything,
Right.
if I did anything that helped them in their career, if I got them an inch closer to the brass ring, then I did what I was supposed to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
A guy like Kofi made it with it, 3 years? Seriously, from starting wrestling.
Well, he's a kid that he was so talented.
Right.
He had it all.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, you have it all. Once they get a load of you, that's it. You'll be signed. And that's what happened.
Right.
Same thing with Sasha Banks, Mercedes K. I said, once Vince gets a load of her, when I found out Snoop Dogg was her cousin, I said, forget it. She's out of here.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing how many guys from this area have gone on to great things. I mean, John Cena wrestled for you as the prototype.
Yes, he did.
And now,
Yes, he
when
did.
was that? Do you remember the year?
That was 2001, I think.
Do you remember who he wrestled?
Frankie Kazarian.
Wow.
Talk about a match.
Now, did they know each other too from
Yeah,
from
they
California?
tagged they tagged
Right.
together. So Cena was just getting ready to go to Ohio Valley Wrestling.
Yep.
His family had never seen him wrestle. So Steve King, my good friend Steve King, said to me, "Hey, these guys are coming out. His family's never seen him wrestle. Would you book him?" I said, "Sure,
Right.
no problem, happy to." So Cena writes to me, and he said, or actually, he said, "Well, who's he going to work?" He said, "Well, Frankie Kazarian's coming out here. They were tag team partners." I said, "Well, geez, they know each other. Why don't they work each other? You know,
Smart
they know
move.
each other.
Yeah.
That you know." So Cena sends me an email. He says, "Mr. Goldberg, I understand that you have booked me to face Frankie Kazarian on whatever the date was." He says, "I promise you it'll be a great match. I will not let you down." He said all this great stuff. He was such a class kid. And as soon as I laid eyes on him, I said, that kid's going to be world champion one day.
Right.
So, and his dad's a great guy.
Oh, definitely.
Good family,
Definitely.
all that.
One of my favorite shows that I went to with you had Santa Claus there. And he had come over to the table. I was selling my merchandise
Right.
that night. And he's ho-ho-hoing away and all that, giving out
Right.
candy to the kids. So when he came out in the main event, I had to go go closer. And it was Steve Bradley. Now, that same night, if I'm not mistaken, Beth Phoenix made her debut for you, too.
She'd actually wrestled before that.
Oh,
for
she
us.
did wrestle
Yeah.
for you before
Right.
that. Okay, but she
Right.
was with the All-Nighters?
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
She was at that time married to one of them.
Right. Now, I remember Slick was in that match. Was it Alex? When Bradley? I'm sorry, when
It was Alex and Maverick Wild.
Okay,
First blood match.
right. That was incredible. I mean, the place went crazy. And Steve came back. Now, how long was he back before he started WFA?
It was a few months.
Was it?
Yeah. I didn't know that he was going to start his own promotion.
Right.
I knew he was running a school, and I went up there and I wanted to help him. I said, "Can I steer guys your way? You want to come work, do a couple of spots, whatever?" I had no idea that he was going to start his own deal.
Right. Yeah. It's another guy, God, way too soon. Helped a lot of people in the wrestling
Yep.
business.
Yep.
Shall let's go on to some fan questions. I got a lot of them.
Go ahead.
All
Lay 'em
right.
on me.
The first one is from, I think, the #1 fan in all of New England, Damon Farah.
Okay. Good
When
kid.
is NECW returning?
Probably the fall.
The fall?
No, I suffered an injury last October. I broke my right shoulder in 5 places. Yeah, tough injury.
Yeah.
I still can't lift my right arm any higher than this.
Wow.
So it's,
Yeah.
it's about as good as it's going to get.
Right.
But it was a lot to recover from. But fall, we're definitely coming back. No question about that. It's just a matter of when.
Nice. Damon, we'll hit that show together.
Please.
Got a couple questions from our good friend Joe Bruin. Joe wants to know, beyond your own promotion over the years, who has been your favorite rival promotion here in New England?
I don't have a favorite rival promotion. No. No favorite rival promotions.
All right. Joe also wants to know, what was the one moment in NECW that still to this day stands out as your favorite, if you could only pick one moment?
Wow. At our 9th anniversary, when we announced that we had made a deal to go on Comcast Sportsnet, that whole night was just, electricity
Right.
through the whole place. We had shot a video on the news set of Comcast Sportsnet. We did a press conference.
Right.
And we showed it to the crowd, and people went crazy. We showed it to the talent before, and they went crazy. People were crying.
Right.
So it was a great moment.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
My good friend Nathan Fuller wants to know, Sheldon, what is your favorite pay-per-view match of all time?
Have to be Flair Steamboat.
Yeah. Great American Bash, was it?
The one from Chicago and
Oh, Chi-Town.
Yeah, Chi-Town.
Chi-Town Showdown.
yeah. All the Flair Steamboat matches are
Right.
classics.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But yeah.
Nathan Fuller wants to know, Leah, what is your favorite pay-per-view tag team match of all time? I'd have to say the Dudleys and the Eliminators, because the Eliminators would have to be in it, because
Okay.
that's my team. Thanks, Nathan. Ty Whitmore wants to know, what is your vision for NECW in the next 5 to 10 years?
Over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see NECW become more of a content creation company as opposed to just strictly a wrestling company.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we're going to get away from wrestling, not at all. It just means that we're going to be more conscious of the development of content rather than just doing a little show here and a little show there.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Ty. Maverick Wild wants to know, ask him about bringing in Harley Race. How did that all come about with Harley?
Matt and Kyle had brought Harley in for a seminar
Okay.
a couple of years before, so they already knew him and had a relationship with him.
Right.
No, I wanted to do something with the Iron 8 that was special.
Yeah.
And having a former world champion present the trophy, that was special.
Yeah.
And you don't get too much more special than Harley Race.
No, or tougher.
Or tougher, yeah. And just, what a great guy.
Was he?
Oh
Yeah.
my God, what a great guy.
Nice.
Yeah. He sat there doing commentary next to me. I was shaking in my boots.
Yeah.
I don't want to mess up. This is Harley Race. You can
Yeah.
stretch me for not doing it well. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
just,
Great.
even his agent with a walker, the guy
Right.
could still cripple me for life. So
Great
I had
champion.
to do good.
Definitely. Mav also wants to know, why did you think Mav would be a good fit with Doug Williams?
That was Scott Dickinson's call.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And it was a great call. It was the perfect call.
Nice. See that, Mav? Thanks for the
Yes.
questions. My friend Dan Bully, who you met over the weekend at Joe's thing, who do you feel was the best wrestler from NECW to not be signed to the WWE? I think you already said his name
Alex
earlier, but
Arion.
yeah, Alex Arion. Great
question.
talent.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Came along maybe 10, 12 years too early.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if Arion were coming up now,
Right.
it'd be a different story.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. I used to see him all the time wrestling everywhere, and he's just so talented.
He had that uncanny ability of being able to work with anyone of any size
Right.
and make it a credible match.
Right.
We talked about the match with Max Bauer,
Yeah.
and those two were just great. I mean, Alex was maybe half his size, and he just,
Yeah.
it was a totally credible match. It was just amazing to see
Right.
him work against a kid like that.
Definitely. And he could play heel or face, like no problem.
Yeah, I mean, initially he was a baby for
Right,
us.
exactly.
And I didn't think he could be a heel.
Right.
Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a great heel. Dennis Aleph wants to know, what is your take on the fabulous Moolah controversy?
Lulu was a
definitely
great
would like to
woman.
hear
She was
that.
a friend of mine.
Yep.
I knew her. I didn't, do business with her in
Right.
that respect. But, it takes a very tough lady to make it in a man's business like
Yes.
pro wrestling, especially in the era that she came up in.
Right.
I don't believe she was a pimp. I don't believe any of that
neither do
stuff.
I.
Did she take a high percentage of some of the girls' pay? Yes, she did. I'm sure she did.
Right.
That wasn't unusual for the time.
Right.
There are no saints in the wrestling business, but she was not the demon that she was portrayed to be.
Right. I agree with you on that.
She was a great friend and a great lady, and I have nothing but love and respect for Moolah and
Excellent.
Mae Young.
and
God
one of the
rest their
greatest
souls.
and one of the greatest champions of all time. I mean, 40 years, wasn't it? Something
Yeah,
like that. I mean,
yeah.
that's just incredible. No one will ever touch that record for
Exactly.
sure. Dennis, thanks for the question.
Yep.
Adam Luce wants to know, memories of good times in Somerville.
Oh my God, what a great place. The people that wrestled there before they became famous,
Right.
if you think about it, man, it was just a great place. It was its own little world.
Yeah, well, it was a great place to have
Yeah.
shows.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. Adam has one more question. He wants to know about, do you have any memories of Dennis Caluso?
I love Dennis to death. He was a great guy. I used to go down for his shows. He used to invite me down
Right.
all the time. I met him through Tony Rumble. And Dennis, to me, was the promoter that I always wanted to be, in the sense that he really shaped my vision
Okay.
for what I wanted NECW to be.
Right.
Because not only would he bring in names and stuff like that, but his own guys. He had his own guys who were stars
Right.
in their area.
Yeah.
People like Devin Storm, Ace Darling, people of that ilk.
And you used them too, right?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, great guys, and he was just a real character, but a good guy.
Nice.
A real good guy.
Yeah, I've
Always
heard-
straight up with me.
I've heard great things about him from a lot of the wrestlers just on Facebook talking about him here and there, you know?
You know, there wouldn't have been an ECW if it wasn't for Dennis. There wouldn't. A lot of guys. He helped a lot of guys in their career. Tom Brandy.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
he never would have made it out of the blocks without Dennis's help.
Nice.
A lot of guys. Yeah.
Thanks again, Adam. My buddy Dan wants to know whatever happened to Jeremy Prophet.
I love Jeremy Prophet. I think Jeremy has a
talented.
great talent. The guys in the locker room hated him.
Really?
Hated him with a passion.
Wow.
A little eccentric, shall we say. I'm going to tell the truth. First of all, let me start by saying always believed in Jeremy Prophet. I
Right.
thought Jeremy Prophet was a great talent, but Jeremy comes from Canada.
Right.
And Jeremy is a straight arrow, straight shoot, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't, bodybuilder, into
Right.
all this stuff. So he was going home from a show, not our show, but he was in Maine, and he's driving along the interstate in Maine, and cop, lights going on. All of a sudden he panics, and he takes off, and he tries to outrun the cop. He goes down some side street and tries to hide in the woods. Well, this is a guy that doesn't even take an aspirin.
Right.
All right. What's he hiding from?
Yeah.
Anyway, he ended up getting busted and couldn't cross the border again.
Wow.
And that's what happened to Jeremy Prophet. Sad to say.
Right.
He's somebody I miss. As that whole Canadian crew, they had problems with the border crossings.
Wow. I know another guy you
Genesis, it was terrific.
used.
Yeah.
Yep. And you also used Danny Duggan.
Yes.
Danny Duggan.
That was one time.
Only once.
I'm going to have to make it up to Danny Duggan. Danny Duggan, when the time comes, you will be booked. I promise.
He's a hell of a talent.
Yes.
I've watched a lot of his stuff recently because I know
Yeah.
he was close with Kenny Omega too. But Kenny never wrestled for you, did he?
No.
Okay. George Carroll wants to know, who was your favorite booker and why was it him?
Ah, boy. I love George. George is a great kid, and he's so dedicated to wrestling. As a booker, George has his good points and his negative points, more good than negative.
Yeah.
He was blessed at a time with guys that really wanted to do something special. We talked about DC and Eddie Edwards and Sean Gorman. Those guys, they called themselves the Poor Horsemen.
Yeah.
And they did something special. They really wanted to make a mark, and they did. George wasn't always the most organized. Being a booker isn't just, putting matches together. George knows that, but you got to write stuff down. George was notorious for not writing things down, and you got to write things down. If you want to be a booker, if you want to be, you want to be in wrestling, you got to write things down. You got to be a little organized. But George is working for New Japan right now.
Doing great things.
Yeah, I hope he makes a huge mark in wrestling because he deserves to.
Definitely. He actually just posted on Facebook today how he got to go to Perry's seminar at the Bell
Yes.
Time Club the other day and get to see Perry. That was great.
Yep. I know Perry had a big influence on his life and career.
Yes,
Perry
started
Train-
him off. Yep.
Yep.
Jason Balmy. I hope I said that right, spelt it right, Jason. But when is NECW coming back? You already said that in the fall. And how is your recovery coming along?
Very well, very well. I'm back working and doing stuff and plotting my eventual takeover of the universe. So
Nice. Adam Luce came back and says, any stories dealing with legends working with the Cauliflower Alley Club?
Easy for you to say.
Yeah.
Ah, boy, I loved going to that. I was on the board of directors for a number of years.
Right.
And getting to know Lou Thez was the greatest. Lou was one of those guys that when he walked into the room, you knew you were in the presence of someone special. He was very generous with his time.
Right.
So I could call him up anytime and ask him a question about something or someone, and he'd always make time for me. And that's a relationship that I will always cherish.
Right.
He was just such a super guy.
When was the last time you went down there to the
Oh,
college?
gosh, it's
was
been
it
way
years?
too
Yeah.
long, many years. 10 years or so,
yeah.
yeah.
Joe
I'm going
Bro-
back next in this.
I've always
to the next
wanted to
one.
go there. I've already
Gotta
told my
go.
girl I have to.
Gotta go.
Joe Bruin has another question. As a New England Hall of Famer, class of 2009,
Yes.
what was the whole experience like?
Surreal. I really, I wish I had written that speech over again. I would have
Yeah.
said it completely differently.
Yeah.
But it was humbling, and I'm very grateful to Joe
Nice. Joe
for that
put,
accolade.
and like we said earlier, he puts on a first-class event. I mean,
Yeah.
Joe's just a great guy.
Yeah.
Ryan Drew wants to know, I think this is a good question. We'll probably wrap it up, too, with this. Do you think a territory system can still work today? And if so, how do you envision it happening, if it could?
I think it can work today, and I think that that's the growth area in wrestling.
Right.
Because you can't really be international because you need big television exposure.
Right.
And how many outlets are there for that?
True.
Other than, of course, the internet, which is international exposure.
Yeah.
But it could happen. It could certainly happen. You'd have to have a lot of money behind it.
Right.
That's the thing. That's a big parallel between that and my theater days.
Right.
Is that the reason I had to get out of the theater business because the buy-in got to be too big.
Oh, okay.
So wrestling's getting to be the same thing. You can't just put on a little show anymore. Now you gotta spiff it up, and
Right.
that's a big thing now.
Nice.
So
We're going to play the name. Actually, no. Before we get into the name game, I want to talk to you about part of was the 7 series matches that Adam Pearce had with Colt Cabana for the NWA Championship. That was the 7th one for you?
not the 7th
No?
one. No, 7th
Tell
one
us
was actually in
about that.
Australia.
Tell us about that.
Dave Marquez. I joined the NWA again after being involved with it with the late Tony Rumble.
Right.
Bob Trobich, who was the executive director of the NWA, longtime friend of mine, again through Dennis Coraluzzo. Bob and my friend Dave Marquez were doing some great things. And they pitched me the idea of this series of matches around the country, and I wanted to be involved in it. And we agreed to host 2 of the matches. And interesting that their series of matches, that's the precursor to All In. Because these 2 guys basically put together a package, and they sold it to promoters around the country.
Yeah.
So that was really their doing.
Right.
Great stuff.
Was that the only 2 times Colt wrestled for you?
Yes. He was supposed to wrestle on our first anniversary show, him and CM Punk, and they didn't make the trip. Decided they didn't want to
Probably
drive.
Punk's. That was probably Punk's call. Just kidding. He was never very nice.
I liked him
Do you? Yeah.
immensely, yes.
Nice.
Still do.
Very good. So, well, listen, I know everybody's excited for this coming fall to see NECW come back. You were nice enough to say you'd stick around, do another half hour after this one ends.
I love it. Love it. Looking
We're going to
forward to
play
it.
the name game. Got a lot of names.
Oh,
I got
boy.
if we go through them, I got a lot of names up here.
Okay.
So I just want to say thank you very much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you. I
glad-
finally made it.
Yes.
I'm finally, this is it. My life is complete.
That's it. Guys, make sure you check back in like 5 minutes, okay? We're out. Sheldon, thank you.
My pleasure.
Peace.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.